West Columbia author A.J. Brown. Have you seen the coffin bookcase in his booth yet? It's something that you got to see, and it kind of explains exactly what he writes about. So here is A.J.
Good morning. That's loud. I wasn't expecting that. This is the first time I've done something like this, so I apologize if I stutter over stuff. My booth is over here. I am a local author. I grew up right here in Cayce. This is my high school. I'm not going to talk a lot. I'm just going to read one of my very short stories. And I hope y'all enjoy it. This is called Marion Wilson's Last Walk. It wasn't supposed to snow. Not in the middle of March and not down in South Carolina, but it did. Marion stared out the window of the small cabin. He held the curtain back with one arthritic hand. Though he felt the cold coming from just beyond the door, it was the bright white flurries that held his attention. The yard wasn't covered yet, but he had a feeling it would be soon enough. "Don't worry, Olivia," he said in a tired voice that sounded nothing like that of his youth. "I'm coming to see you." Marion shuffled his way across the living room floor to a closet held closed by a hook latch. He flipped the latch up and the door opened with a groan. He had heard so many times he no longer registered it. He plucked out a gray coat, one he has worn since the early 70s, and he slipped it on. "Still a perfect fit," he heard Olivia say. "Yes, it is," he responded. He reached onto the shelf above the pole the clothes hung on and grabbed his gray fedora, the one with the black ribbon and the deep pinch in it. He placed it on his head. There was a mirror on the inside of the door. He looked in it and then tugged the fedora down he tugged down the brim just above his eyebrows. Satisfied it was where he wanted it, he nodded and closed the door, latching the hook to keep it closed. "Don't forget your gloves." "I won't, darling." In his bedroom, one with dark wood paneling on the walls and an almost threadbare carpet on the floor, he reached into the dresser across the room from his bed. The top drawer held socks, underwear, and his warm gloves. They were gray, like fedora and his winter coat. He straightened his coat and took a deep breath. "You look quite dapper," Olivia said. "Thank you, darling." A few minutes later, he stepped outside and locked his door. It wasn't as cold as he thought it would be. Still, he buttoned his coat all the way to his neck. "You forgot your scarf, Marion." "I know. Maybe you should go back and get it." He thought this over and shook his head. "No, I need to hurry. They're calling for more snow and lower temperatures, so I don't have much time if I'm going to visit today." Marion turned from the door and looked out over the yard. It was nothing special, just some bushes and trees and an old tire swing and a tall oak off to his right where his car sat. A wooden fence surrounded the yard with an opening where the dirt driveway led away from the house. Beyond the driveway and the yard was an expanse of trees that didn't quite equal a set of woods. This is what Marion would walk through. Though he wore gloves, he shoved his hands into his coat pockets. "I'm going to hurt when I get back," he whispered and then cringed. He looked around as if someone had heard him. "I'm sorry, darling. I didn't mean it that way." There were no steps leading to a porch on his cabin. There was a small deck and a 6-inch drop to the ground. He stepped from the porch and made his way through the yard onto the dirt and gravel driveway. Snow floated around him and crunched beneath his weight. Though he was well into his 80th year, he still held the wonderment of a 6-year-old child when it came to winter weather. Even now, when he needed to make his weekly visit, he was still in awe of its beauty. His cheeks were already cold and pink by the time he made it down the driveway into the line of trees. "It's cold out here," Olivia said. "Yes, it is, darling," he responded, "but it will be okay." He dipped into the trees, following a footpath, barely touched by the snow so far that morning. Flurries still fell, but nothing really stuck. But when he reached the outside of the trees, the snow was coming down harder. The flakes were as big as nickels and quarters, and at least half inch had already accumulated on the ground. It's coming down hard now, he whispered. Standing outside the trees, he looked on toward the field in the distance. Like the line of trees, there was a path that led through it, to where Marion's eyes stared off to. It was a small area, fenced in with a brick wall and an iron gate. I'm almost there, Olivia, he said. The snow picked up and blew around him. His cheeks were red, and his nose was a shade of cherry. The chill had set into his bones, especially his legs, causing him to walk stiffly. It didn't take him long to reach the fence. Just outside the gate was a sign that read Wilson Family Cemetery. Marion went to the gate and worked the handle to open it. He walked in, passing the gravestones of long-past family members. To the left was Dad and Mom. A little further down were his grandparents, buried here before Marion built the fence and built the gate. Uncle Abernathy was to his right, interred with Aunt Marion. He passed 3 of his 4 children. All of them passed him from this plane of existence before turning 50. One of them, Marion Jr., passed in Vietnam at age 20. He didn't look at his oldest son's grave. It still hurt too much even after all these years. His feet left big prints in the deepening snow as he passed the rest of the graves, stopping only when he reached a new one, 5 months new. He knelt down carefully, his knees sinking into the snow. It was only seconds before the bite of the cold and wet seeped through the material and sunk its teeth into his knees. With one gloved hand, he wiped the snow away from the marker on the ground. He stared at the engraved inscription on it until cold tears blurred his vision. Olivia Marie Wilson, February 4, 1939, October 28, 2016. Beloved wife and mother, at rest with her Savior. I'm here, darling, he said. His voice was thick with sadness. I am too, she whispered. He felt her hand on his shoulder. Thank you for coming. He turned his head and shoulders. There she stood in her Sunday best, a white dress with blue flowers on them, her black heels and her gray hair pulled back away from her face and held in a bun by any number of hair ribbons and barrettes she had when she was among the living. Her eyes were the same gray as her hair, and the wrinkles on her face didn't appear as deep as they had before she died. No, they looked less like the wounds of time and more like lines of character put there through years lived. I told you I would always be there for you. You always were. I'm tired, darling, he said as he looked at her. Then rest, love. He nodded. I think I will go home now. Marion looked back at the marker with his wife's name on it. His heart hurt. It had been less than 6 months, but it felt like it had been just yesterday when she took her last breath and left him alone. I miss you, he said, and let the tears fall. They were warm against his cold skin. He put his face in his hands and leaned forward. His forearms touched the ground. Like his pants, the snow soaked through the material of his winter coat. He closed his eyes against fresh tears. As he knelt there, his legs grew numb, as did his arms. The exhaustion of the walk there and the weight of his loneliness pulled at him. At some point, he yawned. I need to go now, he said, and went to stand. He pushed up with his hands, and then Olivia was beside him. Love, let me help you up. He looked at her soft hand, one that had grown bony and brittle at the end of her life, but it seemed to have a little more flesh on it than when she passed. Please, she asked. Marion nodded. Thank you. He reached up and took her hand. It was tangible and soft, and it felt like her. He got to his feet, a little easier than he thought he would. Come, let's go, she whispered. I'd like that. His voice didn't feel as heavy as it had earlier. Neither did his heart. He seemed whole, a feeling he hadn't had since Olivia's death. Marion left her grave and made his way back through the final resting spots of his family members. Olivia held his hands, and in their wake they left no footprints in the snow, and Marion was no longer cold. That is the end of my story. If y'all remember, we had a snow 4 weeks ago here in South Carolina. My wife and I took a trip to Peak so my son could play in the snow, and we came across footsteps in a graveyard, very much like the ones in this story. And as I stood there, I don't recall seeing footsteps on the way back out, and that's where the story came from. I appreciate your time. Thank you for listening to me. Our booth is over here on the other side, number 6. Come visit me. I'd love to talk. Y'all have a great day.